What would happen if a boss returned to the cafe his father left him, only to discover that his own employees were threatening to spit in customers' drinks? If there was ever a place that symbolized warmth, quality, and family pride, for Derek Sloan, it was Cafe Number 4 on Maple Street, the shop his father built with his own hands, once known for the lines of customers wrapping around the block every Saturday morning. But today, as Derek stepped out of the rental car parked across the street, he wasn't greeted by cheerful chatter or the rich aroma of fresh coffee. Instead, there was an unsettling silence and the disappointed looks of two customers walking out, shaking their heads in frustration. He adjusted his cap, pulled the worn hoodie tighter around his face to hide his identity, and slowly crossed the street like a stranger just passing by. It had been more than a year since he last set foot in this place, since the day his father passed away and left the cafe chain for Derek to manage. Since then, he had been buried under distributor contracts, payroll systems, expansion strategies, and an endless string of meetings, gradually drifting away from the soul of the brand his father once carefully nurtured. He barely knew the current managers anymore, let alone the baristas behind the counter. It wasn't until complaints about this location started piling up online, rude staff, long waits, cold coffee, that Derek demanded answers. But the response from Miles, the district manager, was nothing more than a vague chuckle and a half-hearted excuse about staffing adjustments. There was something in his tone that chilled Derek to the bone, so he returned, not as the boss, but as a customer who needed to see the truth for himself. He let his beard grow out, put on prescription glasses, wore a tattered hoodie, and assumed the tired posture of a college student who hadn't slept all night. No one here had ever seen him in person beyond a headshot on an internal report. His father had run this shop personally, and since his passing, Derek had never once appeared before this staff. As he stepped through the glass door, Derek was hit with the acrid smell of burnt espresso hanging in the air. The music was cranked up to an absurd volume for a morning crowd. The bar counter was coated in a sticky layer of syrup like dried glue. He stood at the end of the short line behind a woman struggling with a diaper bag and a wailing child. Behind the counter, a platinum blonde barista with a messy bun and a phone tucked beneath her apron strap glanced up briefly, then looked back down to fiddle with her nails. "Next," she said in a flat, robotic tone. Derek clearly saw her eyes roll in frustration as the woman in front of him fumbled to find cash while trying to calm her baby. When it was finally his turn, Derek simply said, "Large black coffee, please." Not a word in response, not even a glance. She tapped the screen, held out her hand for the payment, as if she were doing him a favor. Derek paid in cash, took the cup, and walked to the far corner near the hallway leading to the staff area, where he knew he would start hearing the things no report would ever capture. He needed to know what was rotting from within, and who was helping it spread. Derek chose a small table tucked against the wall just behind the refrigeration unit, hidden enough to stay out of the staff's line of sight, but close enough to the hallway leading to the employee break room, where he was certain he'd hear what no security camera could ever capture: the truth. The coffee in his hand was still warm, but the moment it touched his lips, he winced. Bitter, flat, and lifeless, like it had been brewed from an old batch left overnight. The air in the cafe felt drained of energy, not because of a lack of customers, but because it lacked the very spirit his father had poured into every corner of this place: warmth and respect. Only one other guest sat quietly, scrolling through their phone, while the rest of the room was filled with the faint murmur of voices coming from deep within the hallway. Derek tilted his head slightly, straining to listen. A female voice came first, shrill and angry. "If one more idiot asks for a dairy-free option, I swear I'm gonna spit in their drink." Derek froze. It was the voice of the platinum blonde barista who had just served him. A male voice followed, laughing crudely. "Yesterday, some guy tried to return his coffee because it was weak. I told him, 'You want strong? Don't order drip at a real cafe.'" They both burst into laughter as if they were trading bar jokes, not talking about customers. Derek felt heat rising to his temples. The female voice continued, dripping with disdain. "I don't even care anymore. This place is trash. We're short-staffed and management's scared of me. Who's gonna fire me?" The guy chimed in, smugly. "Told Miles to stop wasting time training that new girl. She's slow as hell. I said it straight. Either she speeds up or she loses hours." Derek clenched his fist against the table, boiling inside. A new employee, not even here a full week, already being targeted by her own team, and Miles, the district manager, not only failing to intervene but enabling the decay. He placed the cup down, stood up, and strode toward the counter, just as the two baristas stepped out of the hallway, still laughing. The tall guy with slicked-back hair froze mid-grin as he met Derek's cold, unflinching gaze. Can I help you?" he stammered. Derek said nothing. He just stared. Then, without a word, he turned, pushed open the door, and walked out, leaving behind a cloud of confusion and a dozen questions hanging in the air. Inside his car, he sat in silence. Not out of shock, but out of rage. He had buried himself in spreadsheets and meetings for too long, and now the very place that once stood for pride had become a joke at the expense of its own customers. But there was no one else to blame but him. He pulled out his phone and dialed Nina, the only person he still trusted. "I need the full staff list for location number 4, everyone's schedule, and find out when the next shift is for the new hire. Her name is Elena." Nina hesitated. "Is something wrong?" Derek's voice was low and steady. "It's wrong, but I'm going to make it right." The sky hadn't fully brightened. A thin layer of fog clung to the windshield as Derek sat in the back parking lot of the cafe, eyes fixed on the employee entrance. His watch read 6:23 a.m. He had been there since before 5:45 after receiving the schedule from his assistant Nina. According to it, Elena, the new hire, was set to open this morning alongside 2 existing staff members, Trent and Harper. Derek had barely slept the night before. The mocking tone, the customer contempt, the cold indifference of those 2 employees kept replaying in his mind like a broken recording on loop. But what haunted him most was the phrase, "cut her hours," a cowardly form of manipulation often used by those who rule from the shadows to silence any spark of potential that dares to rise. An old Toyota pulled into the lot and stopped near the dumpster. A petite young woman stepped out, hastily pulling a knit cap over her ears before reaching into the car for a large canvas tote. Even from a distance, Derek saw the moment she paused in front of the door, took a deep breath to steady herself, then unlocked and pushed it open. As the door began to swing shut, he moved quickly, catching it with his foot and slipping in behind her. Elena turned, startled. "Oh, I thought I'd locked that," she said. Derek gave a small smile, lowering his hood and speaking in a calm, steady voice. "It's okay. Name's Calb. First shift today. I'm shadowing the morning team." She nodded, offering a polite handshake. "I'm Elena, pretty new too. Just over 2 weeks in." The hallway to the employee area was narrow, filled with the musty smell of old rags. They entered the break room, just a cramped space with dented metal lockers, a rusted mini fridge, and a folding table pushed into a corner topped with a box of stale donuts. Elena shed her coat, quickly tied up her hair, and slipped on an apron. She moved fast, neat, and precise, but there was a guarded look in her eyes, as if bracing herself for the next correction. "You'll probably start at the dish and inventory station. That's where they always put new people," she said, not unkindly, but with the tone of someone repeating what she had been told too many times. Derek asked softly, "Do you like working here?" Elena paused, then offered a faint smile and spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "Anywhere that gives me shifts is fine. I study at night, so I just need to earn enough to get by." Before he could ask more, hurried footsteps echoed down the hall. The door swung open. Trent, a tall, wiry barista with the walk of someone who cared for no one, stepped in, earbuds still around his neck, chewing gum. He glanced at Elena and muttered, "Early," then turned to Derek with a frown. "Who's this?" Elena answered for him. "New guy, first shift." Trent gave Derek a once-over, like inspecting a piece of cheap equipment. "Why are they sending us more people? We've got too many as it is." Without waiting for a reply, he pointed and issued orders. "Elena, front counter, Calb dishes, stay out of the way." Derek nodded, keeping a neutral expression. As the 3 of them stepped out into the still-dark cafe, not yet lit for opening, he leaned slightly toward Elena and whispered, "Is he always like that?" She gave a small, tight-lipped smile without meeting his eyes. "Just stay quiet and no one bothers you." Derek gripped the strap of his apron a little tighter. He understood perfectly. This place wasn't just dysfunctional, it was breaking the very people still trying to care. And today, he would begin doing what he should have done a long time ago, cleaning it out from the root. As Derek stepped into the dish station, sunlight slowly crept through the large front windows. But inside him, a darker curtain was quietly descending. The espresso machine rattled, the grinder groaned, everything sounded like it hadn't been maintained in ages. The sink area was in awful condition, milk pitchers still coated in residue, moldy rags, and a broken drying rack missing a leg, making it tilt dangerously as if everything on it might topple at any moment. Meanwhile, Elena moved quickly, arranging pastries, aligning cups, checking each item with precision. But her eyes kept scanning the room like someone constantly expecting to be reprimanded. Trent perched on the counter, ordering Harper to set up the grinder while his own attention was fixed solely on his phone. When the first customer walked in at 7:15, Derek knew the storm was about to hit. The cafe filled fast, and so did the orders. Elena became the default target. Every time there was a difficult customer, Trent pushed her forward to take the heat. A middle-aged woman snapped, "I said no whipped cream!" Before Elena could respond, Trent yanked the cup from her hand, dumped it into the sink, and turned to the customer. "Sorry, she's still learning." Elena lowered her head, hands trembling as she remade the drink. Derek stepped over and said quietly, "You didn't do anything wrong." She glanced at him, eyes grateful but exhausted. By 8 a.m., the shop was packed. Harper began cutting corners, no sleeves on hot drinks, mixing up names, skipping measurements to rush the process. A man squinted at his cup. "Is this supposed to be a cappuccino? It's all milk." Harper didn't even look up. "That's right. Cappuccinos have foam. This is a latte." "I don't write the definitions," she replied flatly, walking away. Derek observed closely. The disdain for customers wasn't isolated. It had become culture, a warped, unchecked culture. When he saw Elena apologizing while handing change to a frustrated customer, her hand shaking, he approached. "Do you need to take a break?" "No, I'm just scared I'll mess up again. I need this job," she said, eyes downcast. "You're not the problem," Derek replied firmly. From the espresso machine, Trent shouted, "Calb, go dump the mop bucket, it's full." Derek frowned. "Where do I dump it?" "Behind the dumpster," Harper replied casually, like it was completely normal. "There's no separate sink." Derek froze, a blatant health code violation. He grabbed the bucket and stepped outside where the smell of old mop water lingered, and stains from previous dumps still marred the concrete. A sour stench rose up, slapping him in the face like a reminder of the pride he had once vowed to uphold. Quality and integrity inherited from his father. When he returned, Harper was texting while stirring syrup with a straw. Trent sat atop the espresso machine like it was a throne, and Elena was forcing a smile at a customer complaining about a late order. Derek clenched his fists. He didn't need more evidence. This wasn't a bad shift. This was a system in collapse, and if he didn't act now, his father and everything the man had built would be buried in silence. The public library was quiet at night. Derek sat at a table by the window, 2 paper cups of tea and a thin folder in front of him. When Elena walked in, her backpack slung low, her gaze cautious but polite, he stood up immediately. "Thank you for coming," he said. She hesitated, pulled out a chair, and placed her bag at her feet. Around them, only a few students studied in silence, the soft yellow lighting casting their shadows on the walls like silent observers. Derek slid a cup toward her. "Chamomile tea. I wasn't sure what you liked, but it felt like a safe choice." Elena took the cup, squeezing it gently. "Why did you want to meet me?" He looked up, eyes steady. "My real name is Derek Sloan. I'm the owner of the cafe you work at." She froze. You're the owner?" "I went undercover to see what was really happening, because the manager's reports didn't match the reality." Elena leaned back, her breath quickening. "So, am I in trouble?" "No," Derek shook his head. Derek shook his. "You're the reason I decided to take action. I need to hear the truth from you, not in an office, no consequences, just person to person." She looked down, then spoke softly. "Last week, I almost quit, but I need the money, so I stayed quiet." "What made you want to leave?" "Because even when I did things right, I got blamed. Trent, told me to my face that I could be replaced anytime. Harper told me to just watch and copy, but then she'd always mess up and blame me." Derek listened in silence. Elena continued, her voice calm but sharper. "No one trained me. Every time I asked a question, they looked at me like I was a burden. Once, I made a mistake with the espresso machine because no one showed me how to use it, and they looked at each other and said, "Still doesn't know this stuff by the last shift?" Did the manager ever check in? Miles came by once, 10 minutes, stood right next to Trent. I didn't dare say a word. Derek opened the folder and flipped it around to show her the shift schedule. The morning crew has been understaffed nearly every day this month. No one asked for replacements. Trent wrote the schedule, and Miles approved it without checking. Elena sat still. I thought Harper volunteered for both morning and closing shifts, but she was forced. It's more than that. They've been running the place on their own terms. He closed the folder. That stops today. Elena looked at him, eyes a mix of hope and uncertainty. What are you going to do? Shut the shop for 3 days, clean, retrain everyone. If they want to stay, they'll have to go through proper training. So, everyone gets a chance? I believe in second chances, but not for people who don't care. She bit her lower lip. What about me? Derek smiled. You don't have to prove anything. You'll be the new morning shift lead, not just in title. You'll help build the schedule, weigh in on hiring, and receive advanced training. She looked stunned. Why me? Because you care. And because you didn't give up even when you had every reason to. Elena looked down, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes began to glow. I don't know if I'm ready, Derek replied. You weren't ready for what they threw at you either, but you showed up, and that matters. She nodded slightly. What happens tomorrow? 7 a.m. Meet me at the front door. Anyone who doesn't comply gets a warning. Second offense, they're out. Elena squinted. Trent's not going to accept that. I don't need him to. She smiled for the first time that evening. All right, I'll be there. Derek nodded, gathering the folder. Be prepared, tomorrow will be long. As she stood, she asked softly, Why now? Why not sooner? Derek paused. Because I stopped listening to my employees and only looked at reports. That was my failure. Elena nodded, her expression serious. Then, I guess we both have something to prove. He looked at her, eyes full of respect. And I look forward to seeing you do it. The sun had just begun to rise, and the early morning air was still biting cold, but Derek had already arrived inside the cafe. The glass door bore a sign that read, "Closed for staff training," drawing curious glances from passers-by. A few regulars paused to read it, puzzled but not upset, before continuing on their way. Inside, a temporary operations crew was hard at work scrubbing surfaces, removing outdated equipment, and replacing dented pastry racks with shiny new stainless steel ones. The scent of disinfectant mixed with the rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee slowly erased the stale fatigue that had lingered in the air for months. Derek leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Elena, a petite girl with neatly tied hair and a spotless apron, holding a clipboard and checking inventory with impressive focus. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She didn't wait around for direction. She just worked, precise and efficient. Milk delivery is late. We're short 3 cases of almond milk and 2 packs of oat, Elena reported, eyes still on the list. I already notified the operations lead. Good, Derek nodded. I'll have stock rerouted from Midtown. Can you handle the training instructions? Elena paused, slightly hesitant. Depends who shows up. At exactly 7:30, the door opened. Mira, the platinum blonde barista, walked in, her eyes immediately darting around in visible confusion as she saw unfamiliar workers cleaning walls and replacing syrup containers with brand new ones. She froze, then spotted Derek, now clean-shaven, dressed in a gray blazer, his gaze sharp but calm. You're the owner? Mira stammered. Elena turned from the counter, saying nothing. Derek stepped forward. Yes, you're Mira, right? She nodded. No one told me anything. Because this is a fair chance. Anyone who wants to stay will need to be retrained from the ground up. Mira glanced around the shop. So, what if we don't want to? Then you're free to walk away. But if you stay, the rules change, and no one stands above them anymore. Mira didn't respond. She quietly walked further inside, as if still unsure this was actually happening. 15 minutes later, Trent arrived. Worn hoodie, scowl on his face, he stood outside for a while before finally entering. Without greeting anyone, his eyes scanned the room, landing on Elena. What's going on? he asked, voice low. Derek stepped between them. Company-wide retraining. You're welcome to take part. Trent smirked. You can't just walk in and... I can, Derek interrupted, his voice steady but firm. I'm the founder and operator of this entire system, and you've been running this store unchecked for far too long. That ends today. Trent glanced at Elena, his eyes filled with blame and accusation. You told him everything, didn't you? Elena didn't flinch. I didn't need to. You exposed yourself. Trent turned back to Derek. This is ridiculous. We did what worked. We were short-staffed. We cut hours. Everything had to be flexible. You falsified timesheets, ignored hygiene protocols, and bullied new staff. That's not flexibility. That's abuse of power, Derek replied, his tone unchanged. Trent stood in silence for a moment, then let out a dry laugh. So I guess I'm fired? You'll be paid in full for the past 2 weeks. After that, your access is revoked. You're no longer part of this system. Silence fell. Finally, Trent gave a bitter chuckle, turned, and walked out. No goodbye. As the door closed behind him, Mira stood quietly behind the counter. She spoke softly. I didn't know he was doing all that. I thought he had authority. No one has authority without accountability, Derek replied. If you choose to stay, you need to accept that. Mira looked at him, then gave a slight nod. I'll stay. Derek checked his watch. At exactly 9 a.m., the rest of the team began arriving, some awkward, others wary, but all of them sat still as Elena stepped forward and began the new training protocol. And for the first time in many months, not a single phone was in anyone's hand while someone else was speaking. The training session began under a cloud of quiet tension, part suspicion, part fear. The former employees stood or sat, their eyes scanning the space that had been suddenly and completely transformed. No one spoke. No one dared to ask questions. Elena stood before the freshly mounted notice board, clipboard in hand, her voice clear and steady. We'll go through everything step by step, from sanitation, storage, to customer handling and shift procedures. If you have questions, ask, but let each person finish speaking first. Derek sat at the back of the room, shoulder resting lightly against the wall, arms crossed. He didn't need to intervene. Elena was exceeding every expectation. When Mira raised a hand to ask about the new drink preparation sequence, Elena didn't judge her. She calmly explained each step and pointed out how the layout of the station had been redesigned to cut down on time. When an employee named Theo asked why syrups had to be checked every morning rather than just once at the start of a shift, Elena didn't dodge the question. Because I was once accused by a customer of using the wrong flavor, only to realize the syrup had become diluted. Staff deserve proper guidance, but customers deserve proper service. Derek noticed something subtle yet powerful. Elena never used the word must. Instead, she said we should or we need to do this to help each other. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was modeling a new way to work, with a new tone. By noon, the kitchen had been scrubbed with new cleaning agents, pastry racks arranged by height, the espresso machine maintained according to proper protocol. A dedicated disposal sink had been installed in the back hallway, ending the old habit of dumping mop water outside. On the mini fridge in the break room, Derek posted a new schedule, complete with staff role diagrams, names of team leads, and an anonymous feedback slot for any employee who wanted to speak up. Around 3 p.m., as Elena was explaining the new lunch break system, Derek stepped beside her. Together, they looked at the updated shift chart she had created. Think we missed anything? He asked. Elena studied it for a moment, then pointed to the noon to 2 p.m. slot on weekends. That's a risky time to overlap breaks. If we're not careful, no one will be left at the counter during peak hours. Derek nodded. We'll stagger the breaks by 30 minutes. Elena paused, then asked quietly, will all of this last? Derek didn't answer right away. He looked around, from the freshly scrubbed corner cabinet to the curious but no longer fearful expressions of the newer staff. If it keeps working, yes. But what I really want to preserve isn't the checklist, it's the culture. Elena nodded slightly. That's much harder. Derek smiled. But you're already doing it. He looked at her intently, asking for the first time a question about the future. Have you ever thought about being a manager? Elena blinked, visibly surprised. Are you offering? Not yet. but I'm watching. By the end of the day, the operations team began to pack up. The cafe would reopen tomorrow morning. Of the original staff, only 3 remained: Elena, Mira, and Theo. The once silent employee Trent used to dismiss as the quiet one, now the first to volunteer to help calibrate the grinder. As for the others, some may have quietly stepped away. Some might already be plotting a return. But the choice was now clear. Derek turned off the main lights. A faint yellow glow remained over the register. As he moved toward the door, Mira approached, hesitant. "I've been thinking," she said. "I've been a barista since I was 17. I used to love this job, but the longer I stayed, the more I just wanted to get it over with." She looked at him, her eyes finally honest. "Now I want to love it again. I don't know if I can lead anyone, but I'll show up on time. I'll do it the right way." Derek placed a hand on her shoulder gently. "That's enough to start over." He pulled the keys from his ring and handed them to Elena. "You're opening tomorrow. If anything seems off, anything at all, call me." Elena took the keys, gave them a firm squeeze, then slipped them into her pocket like sealing a silent promise. As Derek walked to his car, he looked back. She was still standing there, hand on the glass door, looking inside. Not at the machines, not at the new equipment, but at a place that had once hurt her, now being rebuilt not with paint or polish, but with trust. The next morning, before the sunlight could fully pierce through the frosted windows of the cafe, Elena had already arrived. She stood outside for a moment, keys in hand, taking in the unfamiliar silence of a space that, just a week ago, had felt like a never-ending nightmare. When the door finally clicked open, light poured in, not from the ceiling fixtures, but the light of a new beginning. She switched on every system, walked through each workstation, checked the equipment, tested water temperature, counted cups, syrups, and paper towels. Every action was deliberate, not out of fear of making a mistake, but because she believed what she was doing deserved to be done with care. Derek arrived shortly after, no longer bearing the posture of a boss, but that of a teammate, holding a notebook, dressed simply, his gaze observant but never overbearing. "Did the oat milk from Midtown come in?" Elena nodded. "I checked again early this morning. Everything's stocked. Mira said she'll come in early to help me test the machine." "Good," Derek said. "I'll be in the back observing. But today, you're leading." At exactly 7:55, the door opened. The first customer stepped in, an elderly man known for once complaining about his name being miscalled on an order. Elena greeted him by name with a smile, then personally made his cappuccino, carefully measuring the milk foam. When he received the cup, he paused, then smiled, offering nothing more than a slow nod. Elena watched him go, as if letting go of a weight she had carried for too long. The change had begun, not with banners or slogans, but with one honest cup of coffee. Theo, the quiet employee, stepped out of his shell that day. He welcomed customers, asked about sugar-free options, and recorded every order with precision. Mira handled the grinder like someone reborn. No more sighs, no more eye rolls. She looked up with each new customer, her gaze finally learning to meet theirs. Derek stood silently in the corner of the cafe, writing a few notes. Not to assess anyone, but to remind himself of this truth. This cafe doesn't need a boss. It needs someone to keep the rhythm right. Later, he walked the floor. He looked at the new shift schedule, now posted with photos of each team member and a QR code for anonymous feedback. On the fridge, the lunch breaks were balanced, no one overlapping shifts unfairly. Beside it, a cleaning rotation board, with actual signatures, not just a whoever's free attitude. Elena stood beside him as they looked over a system rebuilt from the ground up. "When do you think it'll really feel stable?" she asked. Derek smiled. "Culture doesn't change overnight, but it starts with a morning like this." Elena nodded. "I still haven't really thought far enough to see myself as a manager long term." "I don't need you to be a manager yet," Derek replied. "I need someone who knows what a decent cup of coffee is and has the courage not to look the other way." By noon, the cafe was no longer a place in need of reform. It had returned to its essence, a space that welcomed people with respect. And at a corner table near the window, a customer sat quietly sipping his latte, the same one who had once written a letter of disappointment. Today, he stayed longer, not because he was waiting, but because he was savoring it. In today's modern business world, success isn't just measured by numbers or growth rates, but by the culture that is built day by day. starting with how you serve a single cup of coffee. Derek didn't choose to point fingers. He chose to begin again, right where trust had once been worn thin, behind the counter. And sometimes real change doesn't begin with a CEO's decision, but with the quiet resilience of an employee who once seemed invisible. If you believe that kindness is still the most lasting foundation any organization can stand on, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss more inspiring stories of rebuilding just like this one. And leave a comment with the phrase, "from the counter," if you believe that big change always starts with the smallest things.